I'm very happy to be able to join from far away digitally uh, your conference on deep renewability, deep regeneration, because to me that's what cradle to cradle means. That things regenerate, things recycle, things arise uh, constantly in renewability, multiplicity. I'm very happy also that I can join you from India, which was the land of textiles. Uh, it was the factory of the world, which is why the East India Company wanted to come here. And and then the British, as a result of their colonization, created an empire of cotton. They destroyed India's textiles, colonized the land of the indigenous people, not just in India, but of the Americas. And then they captured Africans as slaves. The issue of Black Lives Matter is all connected to the empire of cotton, because so much land was grabbed that you then had to grab slaves to be able to pick the cotton and then take it to the mills of Lancashire and Manchester and use the internal combustion engine that should never actually have been created to then dump on the very countries which they had colonized industrial clothing. And our freedom was led by Gandhi with his amazing imagination of nonviolence, where he said, I'm going to get freedom through the spinning wheel. Of course, no one was spinning by the time he returned from South Africa, and he found an old woman who would teach him how to spin. And he got the whole country to spin. And he said, as long as we can make our own clothing, we will be free. As long as we grow indigo and cotton under slavery and wear clothing of slavery, we will be enslaved. And we got our freedom through spinning our own cloth. It was called khadi, which is hand-spun and hand-woven clothing. It was to deal with the empire of cotton, of the empire of the mills, the satanic mills they used to be called, because they also exploited the workers in England. And I have had inspiration from the spinning wheel from the time I've been a child, but even more in my more recent years, dealing with the GMO question, the patenting of seed. And when in 87, I heard the companies talk about owning seed and genetically engineering seed and having an international treaty, the GATT, the trade-related intellectual property rights, to force this on all our countries, my mind went back to the spinning wheel. And I said, in my life now, the seed will be the spinning wheel. And that's what I've done. And that's why I created Navdanya and have been saving seeds. But I grew up in a family where my parents, my mother was a freedom fighter, and we used to spin in the morning. And we used to dress in khadi, the hand-spun, hand-woven cloth. And around the time I must have been 6, 7 years old, this fossil fuel fiber, the nylon, was starting to emerge. And everyone was wearing it because it was fashionable. And we wanted to copy, young kids want to copy their peers. And we asked our mother, could we have a nylon frock instead of the khadi that we were wearing? And she said, I'll never stop you. You really want nylon? I'll get you a nylon frock. But just remember, when you wear nylon, you help the millionaire become a little richer and get his next Mercedes car. She did use the word Mercedes in India. And she said, if you wear hand-spun, hand-woven cloth, a poor woman was able to get their food for her children that night. And to me, this is early lessons of the circular economy in justice, in economic terms, that returns go back to the people who are really creating our fabrics, our clothing, with their work, with their love. And since that time, I've only worn handmade clothing. And and am every minute conscious of the full journey of what one wears. After all, clothes are our second skin. So much money is spent on skincare products. A little consciousness on our second skin would help the world a lot. And I'm so glad you are discussing these issues. I thought of the seed as a spinning wheel. I hadn't not realized that a decade later, Monsanto would bring illegally the GMO BT cotton seeds to India. And then very rapidly, they started to corrupt our regulatory systems and started to collect royalties, even though we did not allow patents on seed. In fact, we have a patent law that says plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. And I did a lot of work with our parliament to ensure this law would be passed. But Monsanto was collecting illegal royalties. So what's the circular economy of the seed? The circular economy of the seed is that the seed must become seed. It must go cradle to cradle. Circular economy of the seed is it must renew. It must be renewable seed. And all renewable seed multiplies. But even more importantly, living seed that goes cradle to cradle supports life. It doesn't just give rise to the next generation of seed. It supports pollinators and insects. And part of it goes back to the soil as organic matter. And then it supports the tremendous web of life that makes soils fertile. That's what organic farming is. And it's such a beautiful miracle in soil to have millions and billions of organisms that actually have been gifted from the organic matter that the seed gave us. In 1 cubic meter of soil, there is, let me just get these figures for you. In 1 cubic meter, 50,000 earthworms, 50,000 insects and mites, 12 million roundworms, algae, fungi, billions of bacteria. And in 100 grams of soil, 100 grams of soil, you know, we have a whole book with my 36 years of research on basically economies of regeneration, economies of recycling. And when the GMO cotton was introduced illegally, I want to insist it was illegal. I took the case to Supreme Court of India, and Monsanto was prevented for 4 years from selling those seeds. They were spreading them illegally. They're still spreading BT cotton Roundup Ready seeds, also illegally. But the first thing that they interrupted was the well-being of the farmer. Because they were collecting royalties even though they didn't have a patent. 5 rupees was the cost of seed before Monsanto came, of cotton seed. And now they were selling it at 4,000 rupees a kilogram. And we never grew cotton in monocultures throughout my life till the late 90s. Cotton would be with millets, would be with the pigeon pea, would be with all the crops a farmer needs. And therefore there was never a distress. And farmer always sold at a good fair price. It was called a cash crop. But Monsanto's BT cotton violated every law of the circular economy. It was a hybrid BT cotton, so the seed did not go to seed. It could not be saved. It did not perform the functions, the ecological functions of living seed. Our studies have shown that there is not a single pollinator on a BT cotton plant, not one. And then on the soil, it's an even more violent assault, because what is BT cotton but shooting with a gene gun BT toxins into the plant cells? And now it's expressing at every moment a high dose toxin, 64 times more toxic than the naturally occurring. And it's in the roots, it's in the leaves, it's in the pollen. Pollen means the bees don't come. Roots and leaves means the soil organisms are dying. And we did a study a few years ago. We did it 10 years after BT cotton. We did an updated study with the top soil ecologists of India. And across 5 districts of the heart of the BT cotton area, we found average of 50% fungi, which includes the mycorrhizal fungi, have disappeared. And even more shocking, 77% of the soil bacteria have gone. After all, if you have organic matter and there's a leaf and there's mulch, that mulch is turned into living soil by bacteria. That's the decomposition's circular economy of soil fertility. And the organisms that allow this circular economy of the soil to be created are being killed. And the farmers themselves, because of the very high cost of seed and the fact that it's non-renewable, ended up being in debt and committing suicide. So India has lost, since globalization in the middle of the 90s, about 400,000 farmers. And the fact that the Indian farmers are protesting on the streets. And today there's going to be a bit of violence. The police is trying to remove them from the protests. But they're there because of the debt and the suicides and the crisis and the new laws which will make the crisis worse. 400,000, and our studies going home to home and looking at district data shows that where there's BT cotton, there's suicides. Now, 85% of the suicides of India, farmer suicides of India, are related to BT cotton. 85%. So that's not a circular economy. And this is the reason it has become so very important to create a circular economy for clothing and textiles, beginning from the seed to how textiles are made, to the consumer economy, to what fibers do we use, what dyes do we use. What I have watched happen to junk food is exactly what's happening to junk clothing. More resources are used to produce it, more capital is used to produce it, and miraculously it turns out cheaper. And that's why the issue of true cost is so important. I've done a book called The True Cost, and I know there's a film called True Cost linked to the textile industry and all the levels of violence, the workers, the young women who died in the factory in Bangladesh, farmers. But even the ones who wear the clothing, for me, clothing is part of you. It's your expression of who you are. And that's why we've had diversity of clothing around the world. We've now managed to create a monoculture where everyone is in the same t-shirt and the same blue jeans. And just the brand name is different, but the brand name is put after the same clothing is made in the same slave factories. Somewhere it goes up to high-end fashion stores and somewhere it goes down to fast fashion stores. But fast fashion and fast clothing for me is wearing clothes that express thoughtlessness, an indifference to the ecological cost to the earth, an indifference to conditions of those who are working on farms and factories to make our clothes, an indifference to our unique identity and conscious choice. Fast fashion makes me a thoughtless clone of millions of others wearing the same throwaway clothing of the same color, irrespective of the culture and climate to which I belong. Fast fashion molds us into identity-less customers and consciousness-less customers. We don't exercise our choice because we are not guided by awareness and consciousness. We could become mannequins in the assembly line of throwaway clothing. The assembly line must churn faster and faster to sell more and waste more and more clothing, instead of cloth being woven in every home. Clothes are being stitched at home, clothes being stitched at home or by tailors down the street. Everyone is buying clothing from a handful of chains with exploitation at every level of the supply chain. What's even more disturbing to me is that it's predicted that clothes consumption will rise by 63%, while more and more people are without clothes because they're throwaway people. They have no work, they have no livelihoods, they can't buy the clothes. So it's a small group of people, and the consumption is increasing 63%. And this means an increase of 62 metric tons to 102 metric tons in 2030 of shirts alone. Fashion goods are purchased even when the old ones are still totally wearable. The quick response model and new supply chain practices of fast fashion even accelerate the speed of it. In recent years, the fashion cycle has steadily decreased to fast fashion retailers selling clothing that is expected to be disposed of after a single wear. We've moved from disposable plastic bags to disposable clothing. This dramatically shortens the consumer's buying cycle. Quick changing stocks, low price fashion goods encourage consumers to visit the stores and make purchases more frequently. As a result, excessive stock and untrendy clothes end up in landfills. They're also contributing, the whole supply chain is contributing to greenhouse gases, and I'm sure in your conference you discussed of how much is contributed. 85% of the plastic pollution, while looking forward to meeting with you today, I just went through some of my recent writings, and look at the titles of news. Cyborg babies, scientists find microparticles in a mother's womb for the first time. 85% of the microplastic in life in the ocean comes from clothing. And none of this was thought through. And we are trying desperately to stop it. How do we change? Where do we begin? I think we begin with each of us. I went back to my inspiration in Ghana. And we have created seed banks of organic cotton, where the seed can go to seed and there can be a circular economy of seed. But these are community seed banks, so there's a circularity of seed exchange. I'm very happy in every village where we work, farmers have stopped growing GMO cotton. And the GMO cotton is now proven to be a failure to do the one job it was supposed to do, control pests. There are more pests, there are more pesticide use. 3 years ago, I had rushed down to Vidarbha because 130 farmers had died of pesticide poisoning, spraying on BT cotton crops where you were never supposed to spray pesticide because this was supposed to be an alternative. So we started, of course, to start with the seed. We work with organic cotton because we built Navdanya, the organic movement, over these 36 years. I started the organic when the protests in 84 happened in Punjab. But then we've joined up with the Gandhi ashrams for hand spinning and hand weaving. And I call it the fibers of freedom. Call it fibers of freedom because it's freedom of the seed to renew. It's freedom of the spinner and the weaver to have a livelihood and dignity. It's the freedom from toxics because we use only vegetable dyes. It's freedom from being part of supply chains that are causing so much harm to the earth, so much harm to future generations, so much harm to the workers. It troubles me a lot that in a short 30 years of globalization, we've forgotten that cloth is woven. The word weaver has gone. I mean, as a result of our independence, we brought back our textiles. We made it the center stage to have policy of handmade, hand-woven fabrics. The shawl I'm wearing is a tie and dye shawl. And these clothes last. I think this shawl must be 50 years old. I'm still wearing my mother's saris. And they never give up. And even if they do, then you can turn it into a spread, you can turn it into a curtain, you can turn it into a quilt. Good clothing never becomes waste. It's always in a circularity of recycling. So last year was 150 years of Gandhi, and I'd been called to give the annual lecture, Gandhi lecture. And at the museum and archives, they showed me this very beautiful fabric. Not this one, but in the archives. And this was a sari that Gandhi had woven by hand for his wife Kasturba. That maroon, we call it manjishtu, it comes from a plant. And he had dyed it himself. And he had stitched the hem himself. And my computer bag is another example of how to have a circular economy. So it's hand woven, hand spun with organic cotton from our farmers, but every leaf is hand printed with vegetable dye. Of course, the background is indigo. And, we had been enslaved for indigo. Before the British colonialism, one bag of indigo used to exchange for a bag of gold. Then they made it slave conditions. So our people were slaves to grow indigo. And then it was really exchanged for blood. We've made indigo a color of freedom again. And every leaf has been hand dyed. I think we have to bring love and care back into the economy, whether it is the economy of food or it is the economy of clothing and textiles. The ability of our creativity has been killed. And we will not be able to end exploitation till we bring our heads, our hands, and our hearts back into the economy. I know it's totally doable. We've done it with fibers of freedom and foods of freedom. And our farmers are earning 10 times more by getting rid of the supply chain that's supposed to make them richer. The farmers who were supposed to chase money are in debt. The farmers serving the earth, protecting biodiversity, protecting the bees and the soil organisms actually have higher incomes. And then they're creating a net of other support systems, the dyers, the weavers. Let us reimagine a world that is non-violent. Let us do it together. I call this project the Fibers of Freedom. I would love to work with you all to see how we can make it the new imagination for a post-COVID world. Thank you. Well, I think a very easy place to begin is to basically say no BT cotton. It's failed, and I hope the conscious world should say we're going to use and promote and wear true organic cotton, not better clothing, but true organic cotton that actually works according to the principles of organic. The second thing is we are in a triple emergency. We're in an ecological emergency with both the climate crisis as well as the species extinction. And I showed you how just one BT cotton can trigger species extinction. We are in an agrarian farmers emergency, and our protests in India are a display of how deep that emergency is. And then we are in a health emergency. But there is the not talked about emergency of economic possibilities. People have lost so many livelihoods, including in the industrialized world, definitely in our part of the world. So if you see all these emergencies together, I think we need to really develop cradle to cradle models of what maximizes livelihood possibilities, what maximizes production systems that actually regenerate biodiversity on the one hand and reverse climate change on the other. And all of this research has been done. It's just that it needs to now move from the research into the economic model. I think we need learning centers everywhere. We've got so many learning centers on organic food. I think we need learning centers on rebuilding the broken chain in textiles. People are just bursting to do things differently, both because the economic doors have closed on them, but even when the doors didn't close, people are realizing they cannot be part of what I call the 1% economy. We need to regenerate our living economies, and living economies sustain life. And that means the life of the earth and the life of those who work, not only as workers, but as creative agents. I think we've got to bring art back into textiles. When I wear the shawl, the woman who made it didn't do it like a manufacture. She did it as an expression of her creativity. We've got to bring care and creativity back in the textile system. So if you look closely, all of these are symptoms of one crisis. You know, the climate disruption is a symptom that is showing up because of the way the planetary boundaries have been broken. But another expression of that same violation is the fact that species are going extinct, that the Amazon is being bulldozed for GMO soya. And because forests are being bulldozed, new pandemics are emerging from forests. You know, with Ebola, HIV, all of them have come from the forest, including the corona. So these are actually different symptoms of one common crisis. And the two things we need to do is make a break with the habit of separation. You know, the Cartesian paradigm, the Draconian Newtonian paradigm made us believe that the earth is dead and things are fragmented. We have to recultivate systems thinking. We have to recultivate ecological thinking. And that's where indigenous cultures have never had this rupture in their paradigm of thinking. So we need to bring back systems thinking, and we need to realize that separation is an artificial construct. The reality is interrelatedness and interconnectedness, including interconnectedness of different symptoms of the same process. And then we realize that you don't have to keep addressing the symptoms and fighting with each other to say mine is more important and fight over funding and fight over prioritization, but go to the root. And in the root, we find solidarity.